Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, and today is December 27, 2021. So I am not at home. I'm finishing my Christmas tour, which was taking me to Costa Rica and then to Ohio. So I don't have my usual awesome equipment, but hopefully the sound is good enough. But to make up for that, I do have a great guest. Today I have with me Elissa, did I get that right?
You
Kelly.
did.
Executive coach, keynote speaker, community leader at Elissa Kelly LLC. She's an executive coach and motivational speaker, keynote speaker, sorry. I don't know if you consider yourself motivational. An executive coach and keynote speaker who came from the insurance industry, which is why I invited her on the show. So thank you for joining me today. How's it going?
Thanks for having me, Tony. I appreciate it. It's going well, although I guess maybe not as well as you. I wasn't in Costa Rica recently, so that would have made my Christmas a little better. But
it's the beauty of the new world, where
yes.
I went home 3 times this year because I can do it without taking time off, right? I can work from my mom's house, and it's fantastic, and it's much more fun in the winter because I work for a Chicago-based company, and since we went remote first, about a third of us have spread. I was never in Chicago, but about a third have spread to different places, but 2/3 are in Chicago. So I was in Costa Rica, and basically whenever we had an internal meeting, I would be like, "What's the weather like in Chicago?" And then I'd be like, "It's low of 62, high of 72 today."
I mean, admittedly, I really can't complain. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, so the weather here is pretty nice year round. We don't get snow. You can't shovel sunshine. So
the summer gets very, very hot, but it's better than
it does get hot in the summer. True.
So we always give the guests the chance of giving kind of the elevator pitch for your venture. So what do you do?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. Thank you. So I'm a reformed Fortune 100 executive. You mentioned that I spent most of my career in insurance, which is true. Guilty as charged. I spent 20 years in insurance, and I just decided that I wanted off the hamster wheel. And I really had looked at kind of, what did I want to be next, and what did that look like for me? And it was either take another big role as an executive or do something different. And so I realized what I really loved as an executive was helping others and mentoring and coaching. And so I doubled down on that and started my own business coaching, which was something that I had certainly been doing as a leader for years. But I am an insurance geek. I have 20 years of experience. I think I mentioned that, in a variety of functional roles. So I spent my time in both standard lines in excess and surplus. I started my insurance career actually in claims, and then moved into a finance role as a reinsurance buyer, and then moved into an underwriting and sales role. And then most recently was the chief product officer at Nationwide Excess and Surplus. I led a division that managed product for about $4 billion in premium in that specialized segment of the E&S industry. So I loved what I did, and I loved my insurance career. And I hit a point where I realized that I wanted to do something different for kind of the next leg of what was here for me. And so now I have a personal coaching brand that you mentioned, Elissa Kelly LLC. And so I coach folks at a variety of levels. So managers, directors, VPs, and CEOs in organizations that range from tech startups to nonprofits to Fortune 100s like PwC, Merck, SAP, Google, and certainly insurance carriers. And the majority of my work is actually focused in 3 areas. So I do a lot of work with role transitions. So people who are transitioning to a new role and they want to set themselves up for success during that first 6 months as they transition to a new role or a new company. The second area that I do a lot of work is career advancement. So folks who want to advance their career, they either want to move from an individual contributor to a manager role, or they want to move from a leader role into an officer role, and they're not really sure what's holding them back. So I work on that career advancement area. And then the third area is redefining success. So creating a clearer vision of what success means personally and professionally, or redefining that, because at different points in our careers, success looks different to us. And as you mentioned, in addition to that coaching practice that I have, I'm also a keynote speaker. And certainly I think any good keynote speaker should have some motivation that they deliver. And so I think that's a fair characterization. So I'm a keynote speaker as well. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And I see on your website that you've got a strong focus on kind of diverse talent, female, LGBTQ, Black and Latino leaders.
I do. So one of my passions is really advancing diversity for our future leadership teams. So I really strongly believe that there's an opportunity for us, not just in corporate America, but also in startup leadership teams, for our leadership teams to be more representative of our communities. And so regardless of whether that's gender or ethnicity or sexual orientation, I work predominantly with folks who are diverse or folks who really believe in that mission of creating more diverse leadership teams. And I think that in order to do that, we need to be very deliberate about that diversity rather than just saying we want diversity. And so I made a commitment a couple of years ago, for instance, that at least 25% of my clients in the coaching realm would be Black women, because I really want to help elevate those different populations for future leaders.
Super important. And especially when you have that intersectionality, right? Women have a hard time, especially in insurance. Black people have a hard time. And then when you have a combination of those, that the stats are truly awful in how underpaid and underemployed.
Absolutely.
So that's fantastic. A strong focus on that.
Yeah, it's so true that there's a lot of opportunity. And so I think that, it's easy for us to continue on the same path that we're on. And so an example I would use is this. A couple of years ago, when I made that commitment, I thought that I was doing really well from a diversity perspective. So I have a strong focus on females who want to advance. And that has always been something that I've been an advocate of. And so I felt like I was doing a great job. And I looked around one day and realized that I was mentoring a bunch of white women. And so I thought, oh, I've now transposed what others, had done in the past on me. So I was coaching and mentoring and helping people along that looked just like me, rather than helping others that look different. And so I think sometimes, taking that lens away and really focusing on how do I help others that look different than me, that sound different than me, that have different experiences than what my experiences are, is something that can really not only advance our leadership teams, but get us better business results. And so certainly when I was a leader of teams, I always was an advocate of hiring folks who had different experiences, whether that was they had worked at a different company or they had been in a different area of the organization, or they had a different background than I did. I never wanted to hire another Elissa Kelly because I am the Elissa Kelly. And so I think that there's a better complement that you have when you get those diverse skill sets and you really think outside the box and create more innovation.
And the research nowadays is super clear. Like it used to be a corporate social responsibility DEI effort. Now like the research is clear that diverse teams really do perform better. So there's a strong business case to getting it right.
Yes.
And it's hard to get it right. It's not just deciding that we're going to do better from now on. It's a lot of concentrated effort and a lot of learning how to reach those populations and how to recognize a promise rather than experience, or skill rather than experience.
I would add to that. So I think it's not only creating those diverse teams, but then it's also creating a space that's safe to learn and fail. And so the idea that, you're not going to get everything right the first time, and you should be able to experiment and try new things. And so this idea of what's gotten us here is not going to get us there. I think there's some kind of saying like that. Maybe it's a little different. The idea that we need to think differently going forward. And so creating safe spaces where you don't have to know the answers to everything and you're willing and open as either an organization or a leadership team is really important.
So on the coaching practice, is it generally the individual that's bringing you in, or is it the company that's bringing you in to executive coach somebody?
Yeah, so both. So different experiences. So often organizations will bring a coach or coaches into an organization for one-on-one coaching, whether it's leadership or executives, or they'll bring coaches in a group setting to work with a group of folks who are in a similar place. So managers who want to become better managers, females who are looking to advance. So an organization, I work with both organizations, or I work one-on-one with people. So I have people who come directly to me, usually through referrals to clients I've worked with in the past. Who primarily are in those three areas that I mentioned earlier, either transitioning, they're looking to advance, or they're redefining success. And they're looking to work with somebody on a one-on-one basis to move themselves along. And interestingly, during the pandemic, I've had more people who have reached out on that one-on-one client paying basis versus organization paying basis, because they've said, my organization either doesn't have the resources or is unwilling, or for whatever reason, I feel like I haven't gotten the best career advancement that I could. And so I want to invest in that myself. And certainly coaching is an investment. It's not cheap, but it's not cheap because it's transformational. And so it's interesting to see, that people are investing in it themselves, in addition to organizations who are willing to invest in it to advance high potential talent.
I think a lot of people, and it's well documented, a lot of people took a good look at their careers during the pandemic and decided to change. Within insurance, it hasn't been so much a great resignation. It's been more a great reshuffling. And just before we started recording, we talked a little bit about how it's becoming more and more common for high potential, high experience, like ready to really hit the high levels, the executive levels, people dropping off and going to do something else, going to create their own insurtech or becoming consultants. Or it's becoming so very, very, very common. And I think the pandemic is only accelerating that.
I agree. I think the pandemic has accelerated that for a variety of reasons. And it's interesting to see those changes occurring, because there are people, and I'm a good example of them, where I was at a point in my career, I had 20 years of experience. I had a great role as an executive on the carrier side, and I tapped out. And I tapped out mid-year with this idea of there's something else more for me that's going to satisfy me differently than the role that I'm in. And for me, one of the questions that was really there was this idea of, is this something that I'm doing because I want to do this, or is this something that I'm doing because I feel like I should do this? And so I really took a look at, the history of why I was in the role that I was in, and why I had pushed myself to continue to move up the ladder and had this feeling of, I should be a CEO at some point. And when I really stepped back and said, what do I want my life to look like? Not what do I want my job to be? What do I want to be on my business card, which had been my focus for a lot of my life, admittedly. When I stepped back and said, what do I want my life to look like? It was, I want flexibility. I want to be able to spend a little bit more time with my family and not be on a plane every week. And I like working from home. I like not commuting 2 hours a day. And so when I looked at all of those pieces, not working 60 hours a week, not being stressed all the time, all of those pieces that can go with high pressure executive roles, it was obvious that just wasn't a fit for me any longer. And I know other folks who are 100% in on what that looks like, and that's what they want. And so certainly, the choice that I made is not the choice that's right for everybody or most people, but we are seeing a lot of people who I think are at that decision point and are really reevaluating what's important to me and what do I want to do differently. And I think the travel piece is a good example of that. I have another a former colleague / friend who traveled every week of his life for 25 years, and then the pandemic hit. And he said, I would never have taken a role where I wasn't traveling all the time. And now I'm second guessing that and thinking, well, do I want to continue to do that every week? So I think that one of the positives that really has come from the pandemic for us is this idea of what do we want our lives to look like? And our lives are more than just our jobs and our careers.
I think that it's important to really make it clear to the listeners that like you had really made it when it comes to career. You weren't just director or AVP level. You had a C-level role, and when you say nationwide ENS, I think nationwide ENS doesn't have the ring in most people's ears, but we're talking basically the rebranding of Scottsdale, right? So Scottsdale does have the ring. You basically had made it to the point of being C-level and leading the product at one of the top 2 or 3 most important ENS carriers out there. So deciding to go in a completely different direction, it really was a massive, like the only move from where you were would be to actually run a company.
Yeah, yes. It was definitely, my thought was either I look at moving to running another segment within Nationwide or moving to like a COO type role somewhere in the organization. And my intent was to stay with the organization. I actually was with them 2 different times in my career. I went back to that company 3 or 4 years ago. Time kind of has become malleable since the pandemic, but so I chose to go back again, and that was my intent, that I was going to spend the rest of my career there. And things changed. So as I looked at, do I want to continue on this road, or do I want to do something different? I just really felt pulled in this other direction. And at the same time, you're right. I had made it. And so part of that was really satisfying, that I had done well for myself professionally. And the other part of that was actually really hard. I worked with a coach myself on what the transition would look like. And one of the things we worked on was actually like, how would it feel for me not to have executive on my business card, which seems kind of silly, right? But there are pieces of my identity that was wrapped up in, I'm a corporate executive. That's what I do. That's what I've always wanted. I finally have made that. I've gotten there. And so to just, in essence, feel like, I don't want to say you're giving that up, because certainly I have all of that experience and I use that as a coach. I think that's part of what makes me effective, because I understand and can empathize with folks depending on where they are in their career. And also it's difficult when that's been your life goal, to kind of hop off that treadmill and say, I'm actually going to make a different decision, and I'm really going to pivot. I'm going to jump on a different fork in the road.
Yeah. So for your coaching clients, do you have a specific methodology, a specific approach, or what does it look like, right? If I give you a call tomorrow, or one of the listeners gives you a call tomorrow, and let's say that they're a type 2, a career advancement, right? I've made the senior underwriter level. I really want to get to be a leader, and I seem to be stuck here. How does the process work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that coaching can be, at times, if people haven't worked with a coach before, it can be this kind of ambiguous, unknown thing that people think, oh, you only get a coach if you're like a CEO, or if you're being remediated, right? You've done something wrong. So there are certain organizations where coaching can have a negative connotation, whereas in most organizations, getting an offer of a coach is actually really complimentary. It means you're high potential. I've now circled around that question and forgotten what you actually asked me.
So what's the process like? So is it
Yeah, great, thank you.
Structured, or kind of what does it normally look like?
Yeah. So yes, there's structure to coaching. So usually clients have a goal when they come in. So the goal could be, to your point, I'm an underwriter and I want to move to a manager role. And in fact, I actually just had a client recently that I worked with this fall who was in a similar boat. He was actually in a sales role and he wanted to move into a leadership role. And so we worked on kind of what his drivers were, what his motivators were, why he wanted that. And then we worked through a Hogan personality assessment to identify, where his strengths were and where some of his opportunities were. And one of the things that came out of that engagement, which was a 3-month engagement, was that he actually wasn't ready for a leadership role. He needed an interim role before he moved to that leadership role. And so through that, he gained a lot of self-awareness, and that's really the goal of coaching. So at the heart of coaching, it's about creating new awarenesses so that you can make different decisions on a go-forward basis. It's not about a coach saying you should do this. It's about giving you new skills so that you can make decisions that are best for you. Because I could say to you, Tony, this is something that worked for me when I was at the point in my career that you are now, but we are two very different people. And so what was right for me is very likely not right for you. And so if I tell you something, it's not going to help you learn that skill. And so that's, I think, an important distinction between mentoring and coaching is that coaching is really about giving you new skill sets, whereas mentoring is about offering something up that's based on the experience that you have. And certainly as a coach, I will admit that I do at times offer that up because I have a vast experience. And so I'm more than willing to say, I have some information that might be helpful to you as a client, and happy to share that. But that's not the majority of the work that we do. So from a structural perspective, what coaching looks like is usually 6 to 12 sessions that are on a bi-weekly basis. And the client brings whatever challenge to the session that they want to work on. So there's a goal that you're working towards. And like we talked about earlier, it could be something like you want to move to a manager role. And then in each individual session, we work on a challenge and come up with, come up with a conversation. And I ask a lot of questions in order to get the client to a place where they feel like they have resolution at the end of that conversation. And then usually each of those sessions build on each other because often the issues that we have, whether they're work or personal, are intertwined together. And so that kind of compounds to the end. And the end could be something where, we agree to, we're going to do 6 sessions and we get to the end and you feel like you've achieved your goal. Or we could get to the end of 6 sessions and you could say, I'd like to work a couple more sessions, or I'd like 6 more. And so I think anytime you're working with a coach, not just me, certainly, it's about finding the right fit and having flexibility and figuring out what works for you, depending on what your challenge is that you're trying to address.
I love the perspective of helping them get self-awareness. I think especially if you work at a very large company, it's kind of endemic out there, especially if you're still in the individual contributors levels. It's kind of endemic to not get feedback, right? The here's your 3 out of 5 and your 2% raise. Keep doing what you're doing. But how do I grow? What else do I need to do? Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's such a challenge. And I do think that as individual contributors, there are things that you can do to try and get that feedback. And so sometimes that's about having really great questions. And so one of the things that I work with clients on is what we call stakeholder feedback. And so as an individual contributor, you can do this. So like something you can take away is create 1, 2, 3 questions and go to some people who either you work with or have seen you in meetings or have seen you on, like an associate resource group. It could be something that's even outside of your role, and ask them for feedback. So your feedback could be things like, what do you think of when you think of my brand in the organization? What's something that I'm known for? What's something that I could be more effective at? And so if you have very clear questions, like if you take those 3 questions away and you ask people are usually willing to give feedback. And it's not that common that people come to you and ask for it directly. And so I think whether you send an email or whether you reach out and say, hey, I'm really looking for feedback because I want to grow myself, usually people are willing to take that call and have a conversation with you and give you something that might be actionable.
Yeah, I think people don't do it often because they don't know how. Even the questions that you're giving me, yeah, I just didn't have the tool set to really get the feedback in my own life. I went through years of working in insurance, with being told, "Oh, you're doing great, keep doing what you're doing," and not really growing the way I wanted to grow. And then it was at FLRP where I finally got some feedback. We talking earlier about how I went through that program at Nation, which is fantastic. They finally gave me some real feedback and basically told me, "You come across as arrogant. Don't tell me you're a CPCU, show me you're a CPCU." And it really it really shined the light on what I needed to do differently. And I worked hard on making that change. And every job I've had since, I've actually asked the question after a year, do I come across as arrogant? Right. So that feedback was really valuable. But it took a special program to give me that feedback. I'm like, I've been here for 4 years. Why hadn't you give me that feedback? Why hadn't anybody give me that feedback before? But yes, you're right. If I had the tools to ask for it in a direct way, I might have gotten it a lot earlier. And who knows what else I didn't get because I didn't ask for it that way. So that, I think that's worth the price of admission right there to help you strategize and build the language required to in the language of corporate America.
Yes.
Extract the answers that you need, the actionable items that you need.
I think that language of corporate America, I love that phrase. I think it's so important. And I would double down and say, very similar to you, I wish that I had feedback that was more valuable than I had early on in my career. And I also didn't know how to ask the question. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know what that looked like. I felt very it was awkward to me. I honestly didn't think that anybody would want to have the conversation or be willing to have a conversation. I was very afraid of people that were like a level above me or 2 levels above me. Which is also why at times, I would turn around and think, oh my gosh, how have I gotten to where I am? Because I had so much fear about what others thought of me early on. And I think there's this piece of, so like, if you think about what's the worst thing that could happen? So say you email somebody and you say, hey, I'm working on self-development and here's 3 questions. Would you be willing to take a couple minutes to either respond to me or have a conversation with me? The worst thing that could happen is they don't respond to you. So it probably just means they have too many emails in their box, not that they're not interested in giving you feedback. The best thing that could happen is they not only respond to you, but they say, hey, I'm interested in your advancement and let's can stay connected. And you end up staying connected and you end up with a mentorship with them, years down the road. So, I mean, like if that's your spectrum of opportunity, the worst case scenario starts to feel less risky or scary from my perspective, I would say, at least. I don't know what you think.
No, I agree completely. And I've said this a million times, insurance is largely staffed by very nice people. There's a reason they've stayed within insurance. They like helping people, right? Which is ultimately what we do in our industry. So I think maybe if you worked in, I don't know, in really type A high competition, right? I don't know, consulting or investment banking, maybe the result could be scarier. But within insurance, you really have nothing to lose.
I agree. I mean, I think that there's a piece too of this idea of, take a chance. And so even if you've had a bad experience, whether that's, an ineffective leader, or you've asked for feedback in the past and it didn't go well, or you got feedback that you didn't think was accurate, let's say, don't let that hold you back. Go after it again, because the only way that we can create awarenesses in ourselves in order to become better humans and better associates and better leaders and advance ourselves, if that's what you want to do, is to create more awarenesses about how you show up, why you make the decisions that you make, and how you show up every day.
Makes sense. I see on your LinkedIn listed HUX. What is HUX?
Oh, HUX.
UX.
Yeah, so HUX is an organization that's focused on coaching and organizational development. And so I'm a coach and consultant with them and work with folks there who are interested in coaching as well. And so that organization works predominantly with businesses who are looking either at how to design a culture within their organization or how to integrate coaching and bring coaching into an organization. So, we talked earlier about kind of that spectrum of coaching, and it could be either individual on one-on-one basis, or it can be bringing coaching into an organization and for instance, offering it to everybody who is an executive or offering it to all new directors to set them up for success as they move along.
Okay.
And so maybe an add-on that might be helpful is in coaching, there are consortiums. And so I would consider it one of those. So you could go directly to a coach and hire them, or you could go to a group who has a bunch of coaches and work with them on potentially matching to a coach, because that matching is really important.
Okay, perfect. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So for the listeners, so I've done it before. I've used two coaches during my career at different points. One in a more remedial, help me save my job situation, and the other one in a more this is coming along well, but let's help me get better at sales, which is what I do on a day-to-day basis. They've both been great experiences. They've both been investments. So how much of an investment generally for an individual? How much of a commitment do you look for? And I know that it varies in different coaches.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really fair question, because it's this kind of ambiguous, like, what is it? Is it $100,000? Like how much? And I think that sometimes puts people off. They don't even want to reach out because they're afraid of what the cost is going to be. And so to your point, it's definitely a range. I would say that I would expect a financial commitment. If you're self-paying and you're looking for like 6 sessions, you want to work with somebody for a couple of months on one issue, I would probably expect to pay $2,500 to $3,500 for that. If you are an executive at an organization where they're hiring a coach for you for a 6-month engagement, and you're doing all of the stakeholder interviews and you're doing personality assessments and more, you're probably looking at, $15,000 to $20,000. And so there's a really big range there. And certainly different coaches charge differently. But I would say that would be an expectation. So it's certainly an investment. I'll share that when I hired my first coach, I really had kind of sticker shock because I paid for it myself. And I talked myself through, when I made it to the director level, my reward for myself was I bought myself a Louis Vuitton bag. I said, when I'm going to make it to a director, that's what I'm getting. And so I kind of stepped back and I said, if I'm willing to invest in a handbag, I think I should be willing to invest in something that's really going to give me more return in the long run. Because if you invest in yourself, it's really going to help you advance not only in your organization, but just in your personal life. I don't know what your experience has been, but I'll say that, my coaching experiences, while focused on my professional, have definitely given me heightened awareness about myself that has shifted my perspective as a parent and as a friend on my personal side as well.
My experience has very much been that making investments that make me better for my career have always been in space. And it really is a transition in thinking that I think is absolutely necessary. And I think that Gen X and millennials and the Gen Zers get it a lot more than boomers. Boomers really had this I'm a company man perspective, right?
Yeah.
And I would, like the company manages my career. So they handle all that. Well, that's not the reality we live in anymore, right? And I really do think that people need a self-development budget. It doesn't always have to be an investment in your career skills, but you should be spending some percentage of your income in growing yourself. and that it's going to pay off in spades.
Yeah, I think that self-development can look like a lot of different things. It can look like investment in education. It can look like investment in coaching. It can look, one of the things that I invested this last year in was just getting away by myself for a couple of nights. So really like time away to really think about, what do I want my focus to be as a human for the next year and what's important to me versus just putting all of my focus into work. And so that's certainly something that I'm going to continue on an annual basis going forward as well.
Makes sense. So that's all I've got for now. Great chatting with you, and I look forward to catch up as you continue growing the practice. I am a big fan of coaches that came from insurance, because this is such a crazy industry.
Insurance is a great industry.
Language, and its own. I don't know. It's just very, very different.
Yes.
So I think that if you're in insurance, getting a coach that speaks insurance and that understands the nuances of our industry is going to be advantageous.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thanks for having me today. I really enjoyed connecting with you. If your listeners are interested, you can follow me on LinkedIn or on Instagram and Twitter at Elissa Coaches. Appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. And I will include the link to your LinkedIn with the show notes and to ElissaKelly.com website. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Have a good evening.